Hey everyone, welcome back to a spectacular slow cooker recipe. It's the midst of fall, pumpkin is everywhere. The pumpkin spice latte came out, before September. And I have a really wonderful slow cooker pumpkin blondie recipe I want to share with you all. It's made with whole food ingredients and I can't wait for you to try it. So let's get to it. Okay, explanation of ingredients. In a large mixing bowl, I have 2 flax eggs, which are 2 tablespoons of ground flaxseed mixed with non-dairy milk. You can also use water, not a big deal. The reason why you want to have them in your big bowl is that they'll set and then you can add your wet ingredients and mix everything in the large bowl already. I like to use as minimal amount of bowls as possible. So I combine my ingredients in the bowls and that's why I'm gonna explain them rather than having individual little bowls for each ingredient. It just makes life easier. Okay, let me look at my list of ingredients. Lovely. Okay, so we have vanilla extract, which we're gonna mix into yogurt, pumpkin, almond butter, and if you want a little bit of olive oil. So we're gonna mix that together, but that will be our wet ingredients. The pumpkin, obviously for flavoring, we're using almond butter for healthy oil, and also the yogurt works as an oil, kind of in a way. Sometimes you can use beans. For healthy baking, it can be a little experimental, but this is what I find works best, this combination. You can use olive oil instead of almond butter. Vanilla because of the flavor, and we're going to combine that and set that aside in just a moment. I've chosen to use date sugar, which is dehydrated dates ground into a powder. I used half a cup of date sugar because I think I have half a cup of syrup in the other bowl that I just showed you. And then like half a tablespoon's worth of monk fruit sweetener. I've been using monk fruit for I think a couple months now without erythritol, and I really love it. It's very sweet. I use it in all of my matcha recipes. If you're interested in my matcha recipes, they're always short form and I'll leave them linked in the description too. And then we got our rising agents, baking soda and baking powder, in addition to a teaspoon of kosher salt. So that'll be mixed into our wet ingredients in just a moment. Our dry ingredients, I use a combination of flours. All-purpose flour is very high glycemic, so it's gonna shoot your blood sugar up, but we still want to keep that softness and the fluffiness of the all-purpose flour. So I've used a combination of whole wheat flour, all-purpose flour, almond flour. You can also use oat flour if you prefer. And then I use arrowroot powder to make sure that my ingredients are bound together. Every time you use a nut flour, it just doesn't bind very well. It's always kind of very crumbly, so I like to throw in some arrowroot powder in there just to make sure everything bakes really well and cohesively. And then a tablespoon and a half of pumpkin spice, which is a combination of warming spices such as clove, nutmeg, cinnamon, the works. All right, so let me show you how to mix these in the appropriate order to then put them in the slow cooker. We'll start by getting our 2 flax eggs and combining all of our wet ingredients to that medium to large mixing bowl. Because we're using almond butter in this recipe, I started off with a whisk, and once I noticed that my ingredients were not completely smooth, I hit it with a handheld blender. You can also do this entirely in a Vitamix or a high-speed blender. It really is completely up to you, but I decided to do it first in the mixing bowl. It didn't work so much, so I got my handheld blender out and continued to process the almond butter in addition to the other wet ingredients. I added my sugars, my date sugar, my monk fruit sweetener, and thought to myself, I'm just gonna do the same exact process because date sugar sometimes can be a little bit too clumpy, so the handheld mixer or the Vitamix works perfectly here. Lastly, we'll combine our dry ingredients to our wet ingredients. You can choose to sieve them, but you really don't have to. You just want to make sure that with a rubber spatula, all of your dry ingredients are homogeneous with the wet ingredients and no little small white pockets of flour remain in your mixture. Be careful not to overmix at this stage, but if you continue to mix your batter for about 2 to 5 minutes, you will be just fine. Next, you want to get your slow cooker out, plug it in, and the first step we want to do before adding our mixture will be to line it with parchment paper. I use compostable parchment paper because I feel better about my waste whenever I choose to do this, and I line my parchment paper right into the very center of the slow cooker insert. Then I add all of my mixture to my blondies into the parchment paper / slow cooker insert and spread it out as evenly as possible. Because we are not baking our blondies in a traditional brownie pan, it is going to fit the mold of your slow cooker, whatever that mold is. Mine is sort of an oval shaped. I then close it up with the lid and let it cook. Now that's going to cook on high for 2 hours. You don't want to open the lid for this one. We want to keep the moisture inside. And once it's done baking in the slow cooker, we will open the steam and let it sit for 1 hour so it's fully cooked. Okay, so it's been 2 hours and the slow cooker is on the warm setting. So we're going to open up the lid and let it air out for an hour before we cut into our pumpkin blondies. After those 2 hours have finished, I gently release the lid from my slow cooker, and afterwards you want to let your blondies hang out in the slow cooker for about an hour before you pull them out. They will be too hot and soft at this point that if you were to take them out of the slow cooker, even in the parchment paper, they would be collapsy and fiddly. So let it rest for an hour. Be a little bit patient. I did forget to film the release of my blondies from the slow cooker, but it was pretty simple. I then cut them up into 15 squares. They weren't all even, but they were really nice and gave the same aesthetic as you would had you baked this in a brownie pan. They will last at room temperature for 3 to 5 days, in the fridge for 10 to 12 days, and you can freeze them up to 6 months. This recipe is tasty, nutritious, and guilt-free. Hey everyone, I really hope you enjoyed this recipe. If you guys haven't already subscribed to the channel, make sure you do so. I post recipes every single Friday. Let me know what you think about this recipe with a comment below, and it would mean the world to me if you liked it as well. Be sure to follow me on Instagram, where I post every single day, in addition to, on this platform, short form content. As always, thank you so much for your viewership, and stay tuned for next week.